أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. In a tradition from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, the Imam mentions 10 attributes of the prophets and asks us to test ourselves to see if we have these 10 attributes. If we do have some of these attributes, to thank Allah for it. And if we do not, then try to insist on ourselves to attain these attributes. What are these 10 attributes? Al-yaqeen, certainty. Meaning that I have yaqeen, certainty in my beliefs. 2, al-qana'ah, contentment. If you are content with what you have, this is one of the attributes of the Anbiya. 3, it is, in the tradition, as-sabr, patience, patience against sinning, patience against bad effects, ill effects that you don't like. 4, ash-shukr, gratitude, wal-hilm, forbearance, wa husnul khulq. So each one of these, I want you to see, do you have it? And if you do, thank God. If you don't, try to work on it. Was-sakha, generosity. Wal-ghayra, meaning a protective honor. Protect your family, a protective honor. Was-shaja'a wal-muruwa. The last two is what we're going to talk about tonight, is courage and chivalry, mainly courage. Shuja' or shaja'a means that a person is brave. This is from the akhlaq of the prophets, akhlaq of the anbiya. That a person does not shy away. You've all seen people sometimes, or maybe ourselves, that we are afraid. We are scared to do something. This can affect us. For example, someone wants to get married. They're afraid of it to go forward. Well, they won't get married. Or we have in the tradition about a businessman, for example, that doesn't have courage. He will not increase, for example. He will not be able to profit. When you own your own business, you're supposed to be shuja', you're supposed to be courageous, supposed to trust in Allah. Or what we see today in what is going on, and those who are resisting, and those who are fighting for their faith, for their people, you see how brave they are. You see, for example, how many billions are spent, for example, on defense, if not trillions, a trillion, but yet a brave group or group of individuals are defending. And you see that, alhamdulillah, it is much different than what many people, some of the analysts expected. Why? Because they were brave. Why? Because they were taught. Don't we say, for example, we want to be with you, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, we wish we were with you. Is that just a saying? Or does that really mean, I wish I was with you in Karbala? Well, if I was with you in Karbala, what does that mean? It means that I would be killed in the way of Allah. Because one person added, for example, you can maybe interpret it too, that I wish I was there with you, for example, so that you could win. But from what you understand is, I wish I was there with you so I could be with you. And I could attain that fawz, the azim fawz, that righteous fawz and success. So therefore we are taught throughout our heritage as Muslims, especially as Shia Muslims, to be brave. We look at stories from our Prophet that how he was challenged in Mecca so much, and that he has ma'udi and nabi kama udi. No prophet was bothered and harassed as I was. But yet his courage, either in tabligh, in spreading Islam, or his courage when it came to defending his group and the Muslims, even though many battles they were outnumbered from a 3-to-1 ratio. But yet you see the courage of Rasulullah, and that many of the companions would resort to Rasulullah's courage when they were in danger. Also, you see in our history, for example, Imam Ali alayhi salam is another great figure, courageous figure, one who some of the scholars say in hadith that he had about 1,000 injuries or scars when he passed away. That over time, from all the battles he had, about 1,000. So Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam is another example of being brave. When they came, for example, to kill the Holy Prophet, Laylatul Mabit, and 40 tribes came in order that none of the tribes would be harassed, for example, none of the tribes would be at war with Bani Hashim. They said, let's take 41 from each tribe and we'll try to execute the Prophet. And Imam Ali alayhi salam was aware of this and was instructed, and he slept in the place of Rasulullah, knowing and thinking that he would be killed. So therefore you see from the beginning that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam was very brave, and you can go through the different battles that Imam Ali alayhi salam had with Amr ibn Abdul Wad, for example, in the Battle of the Trench, and you see all of Islam versus all of Kufr, for example, or in the Battle of Khaybar, for example. One of the interesting parts about courage, because courage is something that we learn. And if you want to be courageous, you should be around courageous people. If you want to be courageous, you want to be brave, you should read stories about bravery and about courage. One of the surahs of the Holy Quran that tonight I'd like to go over about, it's interesting, this surah, it mentions Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, that whoever recites this surah, he'll be resurrected on the Day of Judgment with Imam Ali alayhi salam. He'll be resurrected with Imam Ali. What surah is this? Wal Adiyat. The surah Wal Adiyat is one who in the 8th year after Hijrah, a large group, 12,000, an army of 12,000 came to kill the Prophet, came to kill Imam Ali alayhi salam. And this is one of the names of this battle is Dhatul Salasil, meaning Salasil or Silsala means chains in Arabic, the battle of chains. And there the Prophet sends a group of people, but they were not successful to fight against them because they wanted to kill the Prophet. They wanted to kill Imam Ali alayhi salam. So it says on Imam Ali alayhi salam was sent with an army. And they say that this surah, when Imam Ali alayhi salam was victorious, the Prophet recited the surah in his prayer, in his salat. And they asked about it. We never heard this surah before. And the Prophet mentioned to them what had happened, and that Ali alayhi salam is victorious. And that this surah is for Imam Ali alayhi salam, wal adiyat. Interesting thing about this surah is when you look at it, you see that this surah God swears by. Right? Many of the surahs in the Holy Quran, God swears by. This waw, or Farsi say vav, is for qasam. Waw is here, is for qasam. Swearing by the racers panting, wal adiyat dabha. God is swearing by the panting, the sound of the breathing of horses. It's interesting that in Islam, a horse can be something very valuable, very great, as long as what? It is working for Allah. It is in Allah's cause. It is the horse of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, for example, and the followers of the Holy Prophet. So here in this surah, you actually see the virtue of the mujahid, of the person who fights. Not only does Allah, for example, is praising, obviously, this whole, story, but not only the mujahid, God is praising the animal that mujahid is riding, because that horse only has high position because who is riding that horse, right? Right? Or else in this surah, if just horses running around everywhere, Allah doesn't swear on it. He swears on these horses that are fighting and they're carrying that mujahid, that person who is fighting in the path of Allah. Not only that, then فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْحًا, and the producers of sparks when they strike. So therefore, even the hooves, for example, hitting each other, Even the feet, the strikes, for example, the sparks that come together from the hooves of the horses, even that. For example, if in English, if I say, I praise you, for example, I say, may I be sacrificed for you, that's one thing. Then if I say, these are a little bit Farsi expression, I say, may I be sacrificed for the dirt under your feet. That's something higher, right? So then when Allah mentions, may I swear, not by the mujahid, I swear by the horses, the panting of, for example, the chargers, the sparks, the battle, for example, the stirring of the clouds, the dust that these fighters are making. It's very beautiful if you think of this wal-adiyat. It's not only about the person who's attacking, it's about the things that are going on. فَأَثَرْنَ بِهِ نَقْعًا فَوَسَطْنَ بِهِ جَمْعًا. So therefore we see, and the speakers, the producers of sparks, when striking, and the chargers at dawn, striking up thereby clouds of dust, and arriving thereby in the center, collectively in the center of the army, and they destroyed that army of 12,000 by what? The courage of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. So one surah that we can learn about courage is how Imam Ali, every time he was sent, when other people were sent, they failed. When Imam Ali was sent and he was successful. One of his reasons is because of his courage. And this is one of those 10 attributes that we have to instill in ourselves. Now we'll talk later on. Is courage only for the battlefield, for example? No. Is there other types of courage? We'll mention other types of courage or other instances where one of the most courageous people are those who fight against their lower desires. One who can do sin, but chooses not to, for example. So therefore, this is a very important topic that we talk about. Another surah or ayah of the Quran that talks about courage is إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِهِ, that Allah loves those who fight in His cause. Then it says here, صَفًّا, they're in a row. كَأَنَّهُمْ بُنْيَانٌ مَرْصُوصٌ, as if they are a single structure firmly. So Allah loves those who fight, but they are one structure. They are one firm structure that cannot be abolished. Again, so therefore we see that as long as you are together, as long as you have unity, then you'll be you'll be bunyanun marsus. Be this firm one structure, because obviously if we're individuals, we could break us easily. But if you take all of you, for example, 50, 60 people, and make it into one structure, it will be completely more solid. So therefore, these are a few verses of the Holy Quran when it comes to courage. Now, when we talk about courage, we said that there's different types of courage. There's different instances. It's very important for us to make sure that we are courageous in all fields. The first we said, and which is one of the hardest things, which is when it comes to battle, when it comes to giving our lives, when it comes to strife, when it comes to jihad. Because people will do many things, but they don't want to go to jihad. The hypocrite, the munafiq, will not want to go to the battle. You see the munafiqs, when it came to the history of Islam, when there was a battle, some of them, they say that they would run so hard that they would come back to Medina 3 days later. 3 days later, the war is over from the first same day, but the 3 days it took for them to come back. So therefore, you see a very big difference between Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. And I really think this, that if you were to analyze Shiism and the Islam that Ahlul Bayt provides, you see it is very courageous. It is very brave because of the Prophet, because of the stories of Imam Ali, because of Karbala of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, which is one of the very important components of us, that at the end we want to be like Imam Hussein, that we are willing. What does it mean to be Husseini? What does it mean to cry for Imam Hussein? What does it mean to say, I wish I was with you, Imam Hussein? Is it just, for example, a culture for us, just to wear black, for example, and be sad? Or is it for me to learn to fight? And it is a university that is teaching me that at the end, you have to sacrifice everything for Allah. That at the end, the blood will attain victory. These are stories that we learn. This is intrigued in our history. Not only do we say stories of Imam Hussein's companions, some of them is mentioned on the day of Ashura. They even took off their armor and just fought without armor. So we learned the courage of Imam Hussein. 70 versus 10,000, 30,000. Such numbers. Yet we see all the factors of despair there, all the factors to give in, all the factors of fear there. No water, food, for example, starvation, no water. Imam Hussein alayhi salam was with his family members, outnumbered. All these factors were there, but yet Imam Hussein alayhi salam never hesitated. Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam never hesitated. The great companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam never hesitated. And this has for us been a university. That for 1400 years we have cherished Ashura, we have remembered it, and today we are benefiting from that remembrance. Today when we see, nations, we see people, for example, with a military budget that is 1,000 times other military budgets, but you see that when the people are united, when the people are bunyanun marsus, they are together as one entity, nothing can break them, right? Nothing can break these people. As long as they're united, as long as they have iman, as long as they have faith. So therefore, the history of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the culture of being Husseini, which has been the culture of martyrdom in Shiism, has always been one that the Shias throughout history have been brave in the message of fighting against oppression at all odds, no matter, even if you're outnumbered 72 to 30,000, are things that today we are benefiting from. And this is a message for us, even though we might not be, where the battle is happening, but yet many times today, we as Muslims who's trying to practice our Islam, we are in need of courage. If a sister is not courageous, how can she wear the hijab if she's always afraid? Somebody's going to tell her, why are you wearing hijab? To go outside, why are you wearing hijab? She has to be courageous. If a brother, for example, wants to be a good Muslim, a practicing Muslim, one who does good business, for example, and is mutasharra, follows the Sharia, for example, he also needs to be courageous. Or else he'll give in. So what are you doing? Because it's very hard to go against the culture of the people at the time, right? It's very hard if they don't have a practice that you try to explain your practice. You try to even explain sometimes your own name. Everyone else has normal, for example, names. You're just trying to say and introduce yourself. It takes you like 10 minutes, 15 minutes for them to learn how to pronounce your own name properly, right? So these are things that when we're trying to struggle to keep our heritage, to keep our religion, to keep our culture, we need to be brave. And when you see this is one of the 10 attributes that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says one of the attributes of the prophets. Imagine prophets that were not brave. Imagine prophets, for example, Musa alayhi salam, he had a very difficult time, a very difficult test when he was against the Pharaoh of the time. Because the Pharaoh had enslaved the Bani Israel. Pharaoh put a date and chose the best sorcerers and was wearing, for example, clothes that when the sun hit, his clothes, it would like blind you, would glimmer to make himself like a godly figure, for example. And there he presented himself with Haman, for example, with others. And he came, and Prophet Musa, alayhi salam, if he was not courageous, he would was defeated. But Allah instilled courage to Prophet Musa, alayhi salam. And so finally, when he won, and he did, Prophet Musa, alayhi salam, didn't do sorcery, they did sorcery. Prophet Musa did a miracle, and he performed a real snake and serpent came and destroyed whatever sorcery they had. And the sorcerers at that time, they were courageous. And they said, we believe in the Lord of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and they were executed. And then they had to, and this is actually the time of Passover, for example. So when they fled and they left Egypt, and they ran away for their lives because they were, enslaved for many years, the Bani Israel. Finally, they came to a dead end. The army of the Pharaoh caught him and caught the people of Bani Israel. And they were, he's Dhil Autad, the one that would put stakes in people in their hands and leave them to rot, leave them to die. And they were terrified. Now the Pharaoh caught us. Now Prophet Musa alayhi salam is the sea, and behind him is the great army of Egypt. Today, even the pyramids that we see today, the people cannot explain how were they even shaped or formed. Now imagine such an army. But Prophet Musa alayhi salam continued to be brave. He said that my Lord will guide me. My Lord will guide me. He will show me a way. And then when Prophet Musa trusted his Lord, the sea parted and the sea opened, and it showed us that Prophet Musa alayhi salam is as a savior, but he has the sea because Allah controls the sea, and the sea fell and collapsed upon the army of Egypt. So you see, this is one of the great noble traits of the prophets and of the imams that we as Muslims are trying to learn and we're trying to inherit. And today's tonight's topic is, how can I be more brave? How can I be more courageous? Because for me to be successful at my work, I need to be courageous. For me to be successful at family, deen, I need to have courage. And the opposite, fear. Why do we think that it is okay to scare one another? Why do you think it is okay for me to instill fear on one another? Is fear something good in Islam? If fear was something good, why does the Quran mention that to fear Allah only? Or some fear others, for example, or they love others like they love Allah, or they fear others, for example, and they should fear Allah. But we learn in the Quran, Inna awliya Allah la khawfun alayhim. The wali of Allah and the loyalists of Allah, the friends of Allah, the guardians, those who are the vicegerents, they have la khawfun alayhim wa lahum yahzanun, and they don't have huzn, they don't have grief. So how can we be more courageous? What are some of the examples? The first example of courage, we said, is war in the battlefield, which is the ultimate test. 2, the other type of courage is courage against myself. And the tradition mentions that one of the best types of courage is to fight against yourself. There are many people, unfortunately, even when you look at history, they're very strong when it came to the battlefield, but yet they didn't know the limits. Some of the Muslims, quote unquote Muslims at the time, sometimes they would go and they would commit, for example, murder upon people. That's not shaja'a, that's not courage. Courage means to do what is right, to be limited, to be brave, to do what is right, not to go and transgress upon the rights of others, just to go out and harm and hurt others. That's not courage. So therefore we see, if a person cannot control themselves, cannot control their anger, their lust, their passions, to fight against themselves, then they are not courageous. That courage that is our leader mentioned, that those who crossed, there was a time when Iraq attacked Iran and Saddam attacked Iran, they had to go through barbed wire. They had to go through barbed wire. He said, and if you do not go first through the barbed wire of your nafs, your soul, you cannot go through the barbed wire of life. You cannot go through real barbed wire. First, go through the barbed wire of yourself. First, free yourself from these chains and shackles. Then the battlefield will become easy for you. So it is a journey from within. That I have that courage, that I'm fighting against myself. I'm fighting against my imagination. I'm fighting against my desires. Because a lot of fear sometimes happens from imagination, for example. I think something's there. I think I saw something. But if my life is governed by aql and intellect, it's being controlled, my nafs is being controlled, then there's no fear for me. Sometimes there's fear when it comes to spending even. There's, the opposite of fear here would be, courage when it comes to spending in Allah's path. Sometimes I'm afraid if I donate to masjid, I will be poor. Sometimes I'm afraid if I help somebody out, Allah will take more away from me. My resources will be gone. If I give somebody food, what will be left for me? I will not be able to eat, for example. I have that fear. A courageous person is one who might not have a lot of resources, but he's so brave and he trusts Allah so much that he knows that if I give to others, Allah will give to me back. And that is called sacrifice. If a person cannot sacrifice with the money, how can they sacrifice the blood? Now, this is from the tradition from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. So therefore, we understand that that third instance is about spending and sacrificing and being courageous. Sometimes when it comes to our time, we're not, courageous and say, look, I will spend my time, but Allah will give me more barakat for it, for example. Allah will replace it for me. The fourth is in akhlaq. It's an interesting tradition from Imam Ali alayhi salam. لو تميزت الأشياء لكان الصدق مع الشجاعة. If you were to divide things, you would see that telling the truth is part of being courageous. So akhlaq, shaja'a, when it comes to telling the truth. For example, how much, God forbid, do people lie throughout the day? Sometimes people think that children don't lie. Studies show that a few times a day, children even lie. One of the reasons for this is watching their parents. For example, something happens, they might be audited for taxes, they might be, for example, pulled over by police. Something happens and they make an excuse and they lie. So this was happening to me. And the child observes and says, oh, well, sometimes I can lie, right, to get out of it. Because telling the truth, you have to spend for that. If I tell the truth, for example, to that officer, for example, then I have to go to traffic school, for example. Maybe my insurance will be high, for example. So if I am so brave that I'm willing to take the consequences, okay, thumma madha. Okay, I'm sorry I did this. Okay, that's it. People respect that more. But whenever you lie to them or you twist the truth, then especially when it comes to selling things, when it comes to business, if has faults in it, if there's something that brings the quality down, the quantity down, tell them the truth and do tajaratan and tarada and do good business with them. The tradition continues, وَكَانَ الْجُبْنُ مَعَ الْكِذْمِ, and cowardice is with dishonesty. That coward person is the one who's dishonest because he's afraid. He's afraid to be punished. He's afraid to be rebuked, for example, so he's going to lie. So if we're not courageous people, then what's going to happen? We're going to be liars. But if we are courageous people, we'll be those who fight against the desires, we'll be those who give our money in Allah's path, our time in Allah's path, and we'll give our lives in Allah's path. And the final that we see here in the tradition, it says here, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, قَدْ سُئِلَ عَنَ الشَّجَاعَةِ, Imam Hassan alayhi salam was asked about shaja'a. One of those is, وَالصَّبْرَ عِنْدَ التِّعَانِ, in his patience in the face of criticism. That's another type of shaja'a. Somebody comes to you, puts you down, foul-mouths you, but yet you have sabr. They bring you down, you have patience. That's not called being weak. It's very interesting how hadith here in the verse of Quran, they give you a very complete picture of courage. Courage, again, doesn't mean to take the rights of others. Doesn't mean to harm others. Courage actually sometimes means to not do anything. Courage means to be patient. Courage means to be reciprocate with kindness. A person comes to Imam Hassan alayhi salam, cursing his father, Amir al-Mu'mineen. For us, we would be, extremely upset, very, even maybe hostile towards that person. He comes to his father, speaks ill about his father, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Imam Hassan alayhi salam, just how he says in this hadith, he acts upon it, and he has sabr, he has patience, he has endurance. What he says is this. He says, for example, do you have a place to stay? I know you're from Sham, you're from a different area. Do you have a place to stay? Do you have something to eat? He asks him for his well-being. Are you okay? That person says, at the beginning, I thought that Hassan, for example, this family was the worst of people. Now I know that they are the best of people. I wish the world opened up and I was inside the world because I'm so embarrassed. So you see, shaja'a comes with hilm, with sabr, with patience. Sometimes this is patience, and this is what many times for many years that countries that have been learning and nations that have been learning, courage is that sometimes they're very patient. They're not reactionary. They want to do what is right. It takes them a while, but eventually they'll reciprocate how they need to. They'll act how they need to. So how can I be more courageous? I'll give you a few ideas. Inshallah, maybe you can think of some yourself. How could I be more courageous? One is that we'll look at the roots. What is courage coming from? What is fear coming from? What is cowardice coming from? One of it comes from attachments of the world. If I'm attached to my job, if I'm attached to my dunya, if I'm attached to my car, my house, everything that I have, and somebody threatens it, I will be scared. No, don't take that away. Please, no, not that. For example, you ever see a kid, sometimes you think if you try to maybe spank them or give a good, just threaten them or take away something they love a lot, like a toy. That's worse than, for example, spanking their child. Just take away their toy. They're like, no, for example. And we are in the same way because we're still a child. Take away our belongings. I'm afraid, no, don't do that. What happens if I say the truth? What happens if I stand up against Palestine, for Iran, for Iraq, for Lebanon, for example? What happens? What's going to happen? Remember the doctor that was here, and he was one that went to Gaza. You remember the doctor that was here, and he was for about a few weeks. He went to Gaza around last year in the summer. He said that everyone has to sacrifice, do something for Palestine. You have to sacrifice something. You can't just have your normal, everything monetary good, no pressure on you, and free Palestine, free Palestine. Do something for Palestine. In the same way today, for example, you have to be willing to give something. And what causes us to be afraid, our communities to be afraid? Attachments. You built yourself a nice life here. What happens if they take it all away from you? Why do you think Lady Zainab alayhi salam was so courageous when it came to Yazid and the military personnel in the palace of Yazid? Because she had no attachments. What is Yazid going to threaten her with when she has nothing to lose? She has no attachments. Her love was Imam Hussein, and Yazid made him shaheed already, and her family shaheed. What attachments does she have? Nothing but Allah. So therefore, the first step to courage, if you get rid or lower these attachments, you will notice in your own life, you will be much more courageous. But if you keep thinking about dunya, keep talking about it, it's very saddening when I see this amongst our communities. We sit down, we talk about everything as if there's no war going on, as if our leader has not become martyred, for example, about different things. And we go along life with dunya and world and sports and this and that, but yet we see that in reality, we should be one that is not attached to the world. We should be thinking today is a time that we should be making dua for the mustad'afin, for the oppressed, making dua for the victory of Amir al-Mu'mineen, get our hearts involved. But yet we see our hearts are involved with the dunya. This is a sign of attachment of the world. Attachment of the dunya. I say this to myself. 2, if I have tawakkul, if I have trust in Allah, then I'll be courageous. And the tradition says you'll be aqwan nas. You'll be the strongest of people if you trust in Him. What does tawakkul basically mean? I do not know the future. I do not know what will happen to me. I might be fired. I might not be fired. I might lose a lot of things, for example. But I'm going to do this because this is right. That's tawakkul. God, I give you, you're going to sustain me. You're going to protect me. If it wasn't for your protection, then I would never even been born. If I was never even lived so long, I would have been sick. I would have been injured. I would have been harmed. How many dangers did we pass throughout our own personal lives? Why do you need a stronger God? Do you need a more wise God? Do you need a more caring God for you to have tawakkul? Do you not know that He is watching you all the time? So therefore, this tawakkul is the second step. One, remove the attachments. The second, have tawakkul. And therefore we see the third that I'll say is to be with the brave, learn from the brave, read stories about our Prophet, read stories about our Imams, read stories about Imam Ali, his battles, read stories about Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, and the Imams and the companions. Read stories about the qualities of the soldiers of Imam al-Zaman, that it comes to them as if, they're Zubur al-Hadid, the narration says. They're as if, they're iron. Their hearts are like iron. And if they want to remove the jibal, the mountains, they would attack the mountains, for example. They could crush the mountains. These are a reality. Learn stories from the brave, those that today, for example, are giving their lives for Allah, those who, did not care if, for example, as we heard, for example, from our leader said, if you want to make death, for example, very easy for you, if you want to make death easy, Iman makes it death easy. Why? Because you believe that you will not be annihilated. You believe that your soul exists and you go to the next world, you go to another stage. This is what makes death dhalil, makes it humble. Make it humble with what? With Iman, with faith. So therefore, these 3 steps, let's lessen our attachments. I'm saying this to myself. 2, increase our trust in Allah. And 3, read stories about the brave. Be with brave people. Don't be with people that are always scared. And these hopefully will cause this quality, overarching quality of courage that we need for our family lives, we need for our social lives, we need for our political lives. Inshallah, this will be one of the 10 signs, 10 attributes that are the attributes of the prophets, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ahli bayt.